So good morning, and great morning, guys. Welcome to another fabulous episode of Exit Strategies Radio Show. Hey, I'm your host, Colvin J. Millett, broker and owner of Exit Realty, Low Country Group in beautiful North Charleston, South Carolina. So, guys, if you've been tuning in faithfully to this show, first of all, I want to tell you thank you for those from all the way from Monkey's Corner. Y'all know my mama live out there, all the way back down to Hollywood, what you know, no good. I want to say thank you for doing what you do, which is turning that dial to 106.3 FM in the Charleston market and listening to us. I am so grateful. Thank you. For those who listen to us around the globe on our podcast, Exit Strategies Radio Show, maybe you catch us on your favorite podcast application, whether that be Amazon, whether that be Google, whether that be Apple. Yeah, that right there. That is humbling to me to be in all these platforms and whatever platform you listen to us on, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. So you all know our mission is very simple. That is to empower our community through financial literacy and real estate education, guys. We are legacy building, and that is what we do here. Now, y'all have been on an amazing journey with us, and I want to say it gets better. So, hey, we've been talking about money. We've been talking about how to get it. We've been talking about most recently how to keep it, and we're going to stay on that vein right there, how to protect your wealth and how to protect your assets. I'm extremely humbled today to have with us none other than Brian Bradley. Now, Brian is the founder of Bradley Legal Corp, as well as Bradley Financial Planning. Now, I'm going to tell you what he do, right? Y'all got to get this. And I want y'all got to get this. He is an asset protection attorney. Like in my mind, I envision like this person, big bulky guy standing there, arms swole up, and literally stand there on guard to make sure your money don't go where it ain't supposed to go. Right? That's like literally what I envision, right? But he is an asset protection attorney, focuses on tax strategies to assist people in protecting their wealth. So I want to welcome Mr. Bradley, Brian, to the show today. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to have a lot of important things to go over, and I'm going to do a lot of myth busting of misconceptions about this crazy world and word of asset protection. And then like I don't have the Superman power of protecting assets, but I do have like a magic power of like I compete in jiu-jitsu. And so I'll say out in your neck of the woods last year for a big international jiu-jitsu competition. So yeah, so maybe we do like a little bit of jiu-jitsu on asset protection.
So I didn't have it wrong. I was right. I got the protect.
Well, that's why you get the ears. You got to look at, you can't see it on TV, but I got the fighter ears, you know?
I love it.
Yeah.
So Brian, if you don't mind, give our listeners like a high level overview of who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah. So the deep dive is like, I got into this crazy world of asset protection from actually the litigation side of law. So I was a really successful and nationally known trial lawyer, which is a little bit different than how other people get into this. And I just got tired of seeing a lot of clients be taken by a lot of fraudulent lawsuits and trying to protect their assets after it's too late when there's nothing they can do about it, even from just a completely frivolous, bogus lawsuits. And so I started looking around and seeing like, all right, there has to be a solution to this. Like, how can I help my clients beforehand, right? Like, that's the key word. And I started looking around at different firms, and as a trial lawyer, what would I not want to go up against? And so over the time, I found a couple products that I really liked and a couple firms I really enjoyed working with. And it turned into being this hybrid trust, which we'll break down what that is in a little bit later. But I completely transitioned my practice of law all into 100% asset protection because it combined all the things I was passionate about, which was obviously like litigation, law. I like investing, money, taxes. And so when I found this, like, here's this like mythical creature of like combining everything that I enjoy, I didn't feel like I was working anymore because I can geek out and talk about this stuff all day long. And they always say you can find something that you enjoy doing when you're not getting paid to do it. This is what besides choking people out on the mats, like this is it.
Well, look, hopefully we don't make you want to choke anybody out today. How about that? But yeah. I love it. So that is so fascinating to me. You did kind of touch on that whole adage, if you love what you do, then you're no longer working. And there's various ways to say the same thing. Now, one of the things that I have as a note, Brian, that you really kind of focus on as far as asset protection is you leverage insurance policies. And on occasion, we've talked about that on the show, but let's kind of see if we can run the gamut if we can.
Yeah.
You know, we talk wealth and all that stuff. We typically kind of think big picture, big down the road.
Yeah, let's go big picture. Like before we break down specifics, I think it's like, what is this worth and what is it not?
Okay.
You know, and then we can talk about like, what's the difference maybe of like insurance and when that breaks down to actual like asset protection structures. But like the big picture is just, what is this strange word asset protection, right? And it causes a lot of confusion. And so just to numb it down into its simplicity, asset protection is simply placing a legal barrier between your assets and the person suing you, or like creditor, like the plaintiff coming after your money before it's needed, right? Like big capital words, before. And that's it. It's just a barrier, like a safe that you're going to put your gold or your guns and valuables in. So anything of value you want to put behind the legal barrier and out of your personal name, so that's not easily attached with a lien or reach. So it's not hiding money. It's not moving assets to avoid or not pay taxes. That's illegal. There are strategies that we can do with different like financial things like insurance and stuff to help you with decreasing and mitigating your taxes, but that's not asset protection in itself, because asset protection is about avoiding lawsuits that are people trying to take your money. And so just remember, you're going to be taxed on your worldwide income, even if you're like Elon Musk mining asteroids in space and making $1 trillion in space, you're still going to be taxed on that money. So the two big real takeaways here are that it's not to avoid paying taxes. So don't call saying like, hey, Brian, I want asset protection because I don't want to pay taxes. That's tax mitigation. Like that's completely different. It's just to avoid not avoid lawsuits, but avoid damage awards from lawsuits and creditors. And it has to be set up before you're being sued. And that's why I break down the timing a lot in my book, Overexposed, because that's the critical point in time when for this to work. And there's this great case, SEC versus Solo in the Supreme Court case. But basically that case comes down to saying is, this isn't going to work if you do it after the fact, which means it's foreseeable now that you're going to be getting sued. Like I hit somebody with my car, I'm likely going to get sued. Shoot, I need to go protect my assets now. It's too late.
Yeah, because that makes sense, because the action defines the point of liability. So whenever it takes place, that's when it's defined.
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense.
like saying I didn't have fire insurance on my house, had a fire in the house burnt down. Now you call up, hey, I need fire insurance to cover my house that just burnt down. They're not going to cover the fire, right? Same exact thing when it comes to the asset protection world. It works when we create it during peace, when there are no problems, just like building a castle and we're building moats and drawbridges and places for archers to fire and the castle wall and stuff like that. Like, right, we're building our defenses when we're not at war.
Fair enough. So that brings me to this question. So let's say that let's get to the other end of the spectrum. I'm a beginner. I'm beginning to maybe invest in real estate, acquire property, etc. What would be something you would suggest, like in the early stages?
Yeah. So I always tell people, think of winter time. All right. Like when we're building our asset protection structure, right? There's 3 different stages that we're going to go through. Like stage 1, we're going to put on our base layer, right? Like it's really cold outside. Like we talked about before, like I'm in the Portland area. It's winter time. It's really damp and rainy. It's cold. So we dress in layers. Same thing with our asset protection structure. And each layer is going to depend on what stage you are in your investing, how much risk you have, how much exposure you have, and the amount of exposable assets. So layer 1, asset protection 101, is going to be like an LLC and insurance. That's that thin layer of clothes that sits right on your skin. All right. Then we're going to grow a little bit. You're going to start adding more properties. Maybe you have like 2 or 3 now properties, maybe an exposed net worth now of 500,000. That's where we can start adding a second layer, like a sweatshirt for us guys, a cardigan for you ladies. All right. This is going to be layer 2. That's going to be a management company. Some people use Wyoming LLCs. I don't like that route. There's reasons why. We use limited partnerships. That's where most people go for management companies. But that's going to come into effect when we have a little bit more risk, right? Like that 500,000, multiple properties, multiple LLCs. Maybe we're investing in multiple states. So we need to start consolidating our LLCs for tax purposes. Then our picture is going to start changing drastically, right? We're going to probably now have 4, 5, 6 properties, 4 or 5 LLCs, probably worth about $1 million in exposable assets. Or you could be high risk professional, like a doctor or something like that. That's when we need the big guns, right? Like that outer shell waterproof layer. It's a really cold, snowy day. That's your jacket that's going on when you're going out in the winter storm. Those are going to be asset protection trust. And so by layering like this, we're more flexible. Like we're out skiing and we're starting to warm up. We can take the middle layer off, the base layer off, the outer shell layer off, right? Like we can move and adjust. We want the same thing to happen with our asset protection plan. We don't want to be stuck in a corner. And so just think about it by layering. So if you're a greenhorn, right, you're just starting out, you still got to plan for the base layer, which is an LLC and insurance. So if you're buying like your first property, don't say, hey, it's just my first property. Don't worry. You're so new at this. This is like your best chance probably right now of getting sued. The next one is going to be when you start getting a lot of assets and you're doing bigger projects, and then deals falling apart will probably be the next big lawsuit time that you got to worry about. So when you're new, you're going to make a lot of errors or be taken advantage of, and things are just going to crumble. You're going to work through that phase. And then the next phase would be, like you're starting to make it and deals are getting bigger. So just because you're new, this is where it's really important to establish the foundation.
So you are like full circle. I mean, again, you're an attorney, so you understand the legal component, what you can do, what you shouldn't, what you should do, etc. But you're also on the planning side as well. So you're looking down the road financially and the benefits of doing this now legally. But then also, this is how you need to or otherwise plan financially and what this can look like. So what does that transition look like? Not only for you, what time do you take this hat off and put this hat on, but also what does that do for the consumer?
Yeah. So I started adding that in over the last few years because I always had like an insurance license and financial planning. And I realized I was essentially my client's point guard. Like if, people watch basketball, to where like I see everything, like I know what your finances are. I have to worry about you legally, and I'm setting up the buckets to protect you, and then working with the CPAs and financial advisors, but I see where the gaps are. And I realized that you keep calling me to fix these gaps. I might as well create a business around this as well. And so where a lot of this came in is looking at people who need to adult at different stages and saying, all right, do you have kids? Do you have life insurance? What kind of life insurance? Or are you investing? Yes, I'm investing in real estate. All right. Or do you have whole or universal life insurance, something building cash value that then you can utilize that capital to go in and buy more properties from there and utilize that as a tool to build wealth or not, versus just like having like term life insurance, which doesn't really do anything for you and then extinguishes at a certain term and point in time. Or it was as simple as, hey, you got to start, we're about age 40 now. We got to start planning about retirement. Maybe we do some 401ks and rollovers, because a lot of people jump from job to job, create these 401ks, IRAs. And then like, okay, what do we do? Well, let's roll them over into an IRA, and we start planning for actual post-retirement. And then next one is like, we have businesses. You're self-employed. I'm self-employed. How does insurance help my business and keep key employees, or utilize that as a retirement so I don't have to work so hard until the day I die? And so when I look at all these gaps that clients have, or we have kids, my favorite one was saying, all right, I have 2 little girls right now, 7 and 8. I created childhood Head Start plans, which are alternatives to 529 plans. And what that does is it allows more flexibility to where maybe my kids don't want to go to college, but I want to invest for their future. Well, this allows me to contribute a certain amount every year until an age and time where I want to say, okay, hey, it's yours. And then for me, I pick age 25. Okay, now this money went into this account for you. You can use it for whatever. We can use it for college, for school. I got 2 girls that can go to your wedding, so it doesn't bankrupt me. It can go towards your first home, or if you can take a little bit out here and there to pay for it. And eventually, if you don't touch it, if you max contribute it, it'll hit 1 million by the time they're 40. And so I'm like, that's why it's called like $1 Million Baby Plan. And so little things like that, as I start seeing as myself adulting and aging and growing, I'm like, hey, I'm doing this stuff for myself. I'm doing it for my friends and family. I'm offering, might as well offer them to my clients as well. So those were the things on the financial protection side, to where it's like, we got to grow, we got to plan for economic hard times. And then how do we get through these things and still grow?
That was impressive, man. My mind is over here blown. Went to the $1 Million Baby Plan when you were talking about it just now, and to get some context on that, because I've never heard that phrase before. I'm familiar with 529s and all that kind of stuff, but I've never heard that before. So
no, they're amazing. And it's just using like IULs, Index Universal Life Insurance plans. But instead of just setting them up for ourselves, you can set them up for your kids as a more flexible version to the 529. And I like that, because then you can use that money for whatever for them in their life. And then you hand it over to them, and then that can be their future retirement. That can be their investment property. That's their first home. Versus a 529, it's pigeonholed and stuck at only college and education. And then what happens if they choose not to go? Then you're paying these penalties and all these things. So I like flexibility and I like compounding growth. And so it grows faster and it offers a better solution for my kids for their future. So I was like, okay, great. Like it's the same thing as a 529 plan on steroids.
I love it because I see the 529 plans oftentimes associated with higher education, universities, or whatever. I mean, our state for a period ran, or maybe I think they may still run ads for that, encouraging people to 529, blah, 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 blah. It makes perfect sense. But what you just said is profound because, again, now, especially in today's age, not every child goes to college.
No.
Some are focused on a trade. Some are not focused on anything.
A lot of times now it's like, get a trade. You can make more money and make money right away. And then there you go. Okay. So as a parents, we don't know what our kids going to happen with our kids. And then we're doing the responsible thing, 529 plan. Everybody's going to go to college. And the next thing you know, your kid's graduating high school is like, I don't want to go. I'd rather go do X, Y, Z. And you're like, holy beat. Like, where's all this money going to go now? Yeah. I'd rather have the flexibility and growth than saying, hey, and then you teach them along the road of saying, all right, here's our bank. We're becoming our own bank. Here's how we pull it about. Here's how compounding interest works. Okay, want to buy a house early? Okay, take a little bit here. There's your down. Let it keep compounding. And then here's your investment property. Here's your wedding fund. Here's an early retirement if you don't touch it and it compounds till age 50. Now there's your early retirement, right? I mean, it's amazing what you can do with those.
Look here, I am thinking about the whole, I'm very big and we're very big on a legacy and leaving that you leave for that next generation. And, you know, one of the things that oftentimes we find ourselves not in a situation or scenario where enough has been left or anything has been left, quote unquote, to get us to the next level. And basically, if every generation adds to, then you've created and you continue legacy and build and create wealth. I mean, that's the people that have wealth. Oftentimes, that's what happened. Each generation added to and gave more over to the next. So that gave them an advance or a head start. And they worked for it. I mean, it's not necessarily about taking away from or whatever, but people have worked for it. And then every generation adds to it. It's
absolutely. And the one that I really like, I talk about, especially with like firefighters and military people, and it really applies for everybody, but I get this a lot from them, is we work so hard for this day of retirement, like 65, 67, I'm retiring. And then they realize like, oh my God, what happens in 15 years when I blow through all my retirement and my pension? They don't think about post-retirement planning. And so that's when this comes into like annuities, which like most people have when they get older, but they don't think about them until later. I'm like, well, we start taking some of that, like 50% of your 401k or your military retirement, or the one that you get if you're like firefighters and cops, we take like 50% of that at 40, put it into an annuity. Another 50%, 10 years, put that into another annuity. Now what you just did is you're planning for post-retirement income when you're like 75, 80, 90 years old. Then it means you're not going to run out of money.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see that. That's a good one. You just kind of caught me off with that one because I'm thinking about a family member that retired a few years ago with a pension. And he says to me all the time, hey, I gave him 20 years. I got to get 20 years back. Yeah. So retired, if you will, somewhat early, but getting that pension offsets or whatever. But, you know, you get slight costs of, you know.
Well, in the name of the game, you don't beat inflation either.
That's true.
And that's the issue. So you have X amount, great, but then everything inflates, right? So then you're living below the means. You're not going to maintain your same lifestyle. Your health is going to slip on all these things. So we got to beat inflation. We're going to get old and have all these medical bills. How are we going to actually afford everything when we're 75, 80, 90? That's the issue right there.
Yeah, that's the big thing. So for most people, it is trying to acquire assets that you can leverage or rent or what have you to create some cash flow. And then also stockpiling as well. So that you nibble off of it as well.
Yeah. So like the overall scoping picture of this is like, we want the asset protection planning, right? Like separate risk, put risky things like real estate into LLCs, add them flow up into a management company, have the hybrid asset protection trust own everything. Beautiful. Then it's a matter of how do we protect ourselves financially? Then we're looking at gaps. All right. At certain ages come certain things. Like I wouldn't be talking about an annuity to like a 20 or 30-year-old. You're too young for that, right? Like use your 401k, step forced savings plan. Then when you're like 40, we got to start thinking of adulting, right? So it's like, okay, probably having kids, childhood head start plans, get them going. Now I got to think about my post-retirement years. All right, we got to start doing some rollovers and annuities. oh my God, I'm going to be old and I don't want to lose all of my assets to cost of medical bills and all of that. Like medical costs are the number one wealth destroyer beyond like divorces and litigation that there are. And so what do? Long-term care riders with insurance is where we go to cover that, because that's what's going to cover your medical costs. But if you think about it, when you're in your 60s, you're not going to be able to get the coverage because you're too old and unhealthy to actually like apply for it. And so we got to think about that stuff in our 40s, maybe early 50s of, all right, let me go get like an IUL with a long-term care rider. That way I'm still growing my wealth. It's still compounding, but now I'm taking care of myself when I'm older. I need at-home care or I need to go to a long-term care facility. Nowadays, those are averaging $15,000 a month. So if you think about that in 3 years at $15,000 a month, that's just under $500,000. So you don't want that coming out of your rental properties. You don't want that coming out of your personal estate. You want that coming out of either your long-term care rider or Medicare to cover that cost. So those are the things we need to start thinking about there. So that's then we're like, okay, we got the asset protection plan in place. Now let's create the financial planning to then make sure you don't lose everything on all of these costs down the line, and that we have enough money to survive with like the cash flowing properties, cash flow recycling that, getting the different insurance plans in place, and then getting your kids set up and teaching them how to manage the system going forward. That's then creating like generational wealth.
And that's the ticket, man. That is what we try to focus on this show, and what we try to explain to our listeners and give them the insights, the ideas, the connections, all those things to be able to build a different outcome than what many of us have begun with, or otherwise, if you will, inherited, to create a legacy, to create and build wealth and leave wealth, so that the next generation, again, is able to get further down the road.
Right. Like I like to teach my kids how to, it's like, yeah, great. Like I can leave you something. That's my goal, right? Like leave grandkids something. But if I can leave you, as in my children, the most valuable thing is how to create wealth on your own. And that's what I want to teach them, is how to make money on your own, not just how to rely on an inheritance.
So Brian, you've touched this a couple of times. I know it's really covered people. And for our listeners, guys, the book, Overexposed: How to Create Ironclad Protection for Your Wealth and Make Your Assets Untouchable with a Hybrid Trust. So, Brian, what is a hybrid trust?
Yeah, so a hybrid trust, like when you think about the world of trust, people get confused because they think about their like revocable living trust. Like our grandparents may have them, we may have them, maybe like Uncle Bob has one. And they're great for passing assets down, but they can't protect you because they're not designed to. So like they only come to effect when we die or we're unconscious, and like medical directives, financial directives. What happens when we're getting sued while we're living? Right? Mm-hmm. This is where asset protection trusts come into play. Mm-hmm. And so they're very different types of trusts. We need both, though. Don't get me wrong. You need an estate plan, and then we need an asset protection trust if we start buying investment properties and things like that. And so what a hybrid trust is, it's a combination of the strongest trust in the world, the offshore famous Cook Island Trust, and then the domestic version of them. And the reason you hybrid them together is I think about it like hybrid cars. When we take the best out of both worlds and put them together, you have a better product. So they came into effect about 30 years ago. And the reason is the Cook Island one, you have that's most effective, strongest trust in the world. But the problem with them is they're expensive as hell. Like generally like $50,000 to set up, $10,000 to $12,000 a year to maintain. It's just way overkill for most people. And then you have to do mandatory IRS disclosures. And most people they don't need that level of strength, let alone the headache with all the disclosures. Mm-hmm. So then 10 years later it came around, the US is like, hey, we're going to start doing this as well. So we've got about 19 states in the U.S. that have some sort of domestic asset protection, statutes. The problem is, one, not every state has them, and not every state recognizes them. Like if you're in California, they don't recognize them. And so why did we start doing this? Because they're cheaper. So attorneys started using them because they're about $10,000, $12,000 to set up. But the problem is, in about the early 2000s, we had about a case of like In Ray Hubbard, Kilker versus Steelman, Dell versus Dale, just really famous cases of all these domestic trusts just being completely pierced, just meaning not effective, meaning you lose the case, assets lost, goodbye, you go home with nothing. And that's just not a good situation for asset protection. But the positive of them is they're cheaper on cost, right? So if we can take the strength of the offshore component, the highly effective non-recognition of another country's orders or judgments, and combine it with the tax simplicity and ease of a domestic trust, Now you have the best of both worlds. And that's what a hybrid trust is. And they've been around for 30 years, so they're not new. My partner is the one who actually created them about 30 years ago. And they're the most effective and simplistic trust that they are. So you take the Cook Island Trust, domestic for tax simplicity because it's just a tax classification. And now we have that offshore component. If God forbid you get sued for like $1 million because something catastrophic happened, now we have the strength. But until we need it, it's just like a contractor. We put it in the toolbox. It's in our back pocket. It's classified domestically. So it means we don't have all those mandatory disclosures and tax issues that we have to deal with to be foreign.
So your book goes into
breaks all that down.
Breaks all of it down. So obviously definitions and some strategies on how to employ it and when to employ it.
It does. And the book goes through the whole, like, what is asset protection? How do we get into it? Like, what happened with what changed over the last 40 years to even have to do this? And then the layers, when we start with the layers, and it breaks down the pros and cons of each layer, like LLCs. What are the pros and cons? What's the misconception? No, they're not Dracula's layers, like first word, first letter, limited. It goes through all of that. And then how we start scaling as we go and adding and integrating each layer.
That is awesome. So people can get this book. I see it online on Amazon. Is there any place else where people can get it?
Yeah, you can jump on my website, www.btblegal.com, and I have a pop-up that takes you straight to the book right there. And then also people can reach out to me at my email, brian@btblegal.com, and I'll give them like a free 1-hour consultation.
Sweet. So for our listeners, guys, look, you got to check this out because we're always having these conversations and we're always aspiring to the next level, but yet and still we remain where we are. So we got to change that narrative, guys, and we got to connect and plug in. So Brian, that hindsight question, that final question, quote unquote, if you had to do this thing all over again, you've learned a lot in your year. So based upon where you are and what you know, if you can reset the clock back 20 years, what would you have done differently?
I would tell myself, like, take a deep breath. Like, you don't always have to respond right away because, like, I have a tenacious personality and, like, I have a fighter personality, obviously, because I like to fight with jiu-jitsu and stuff. I don't always have to respond and fire off right away a response. So for me personally, and for other people, like, sometimes it's best to just sit there and listen, and you don't need to say anything. And then get in your car or go home. Don't write anything. Don't click send. Don't call the person. Don't say anything, and think and strategize. Like, you don't have to give a response to someone right away. So that would be what I would tell my younger self is you'll get more, not with honey per se, because I think that's misleading. It's just like kissing someone's butt, but you don't need to always have a response right away. Like, oh, okay, great. Like, let me assess this and I'll get back to you.
Take a little bit of time, some patience, if you will. Yeah. You know, I always talk about that. Funny you should say. I always tell people I don't do wearable technology. As much as I like Apple Watches, how they look and all that stuff, and I just can't bring myself to wear one because I used
to, and I got rid of it because I felt like I was always so accessible and had to respond. I was like, I can't. It drove me crazy, so I got rid of it.
I tell people, I think the people I watch with them, it's like they're always on edge, like every 2 seconds. Like, no.
You're always gonna ping, ping. It's like, oh man, when's it off? Yeah.
Crazy. So Brian, I want to thank you for being on the show with us today, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that you are over there on the West Coast just slammed, and it means a lot to me that you thought enough of us to come on the show and grace us, not only with your presence, but most importantly, some amazing and vast knowledge. So I really appreciate you taking that time out today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
So for our listeners, guys, look, y'all have gotten it. Now y'all got to do something with it. So I challenge you not only to apply it, but let us know about the application and the results. Did you make it? Did you get over? Reach out to Brian. Let us know here at the show and give us some feedback in the comments. Let us know that you are applying this information and just changing not only your life, but the lives of those yet to come in your family by applying this knowledge, and that you actually are being strategic about it. So guys, y'all know how I feel. Y'all know what I say. Y'all know I always put the two of those things together, and I give it to you this way, which is to tell you that I love you, and we're going to see you guys